So our theme this time is building people-focused smart cities. The future is now. So the idea here is the world is rapidly becoming more digital. The explosion in digital technologies is playing a major role in shaping our cities, from the Internet of Things to digital platforms for service delivery and 5G coming on for autonomous mobility. And so our challenge here is to set a new direction that favors inclusive, resilient, and sustainable use of technologies by local government. So all of these technologies are coming online, and what we want to make sure is that they benefit our entire communities and everyone in the community. So that's the general theme today. We've got a lot of great speakers lined up. In fact, this is our International Day. We're going to have speakers from China. We have a video message from Nigeria. One of our speakers will be talking about a city in Canada, but he's in Korea.
I'm here to talk about financing the road to smart, sustainable cities. I love this notion of envisioning a world where digital technology and intelligent design will be harnessed to create smart, sustainable cities with high quality living and high quality jobs. Why are we doing smart cities can differ, sometimes quite substantially. So when we look at the problem, we look at cities are the problem, and we have global urbanization. I think the UN has estimated about 1.5 million people move into the cities. That's more every week, I should add. 1.5 million people every week. And all the challenges that cities face with where do they all, where's the affordable housing, their education, jobs, the energy that they will use, the traffic congestion, the water, sanitation. There's an incredible amount of challenges that cities face today. So the solution are the cities. And someone told me, well, Ed Masria of Architecture 2030 said, Cha, you have to focus on the new builds as well as the existing buildings. But the new builds are quite important because 60% of the buildings that make up the cities, or of what we'll see in 2050.
Chengdu Smart City Project, it is called Chengdu E-Governance Center, nicknamed as Chengdu City Brain. It is built in May 2018 and finished in the end of 2018 and put into use after that. So it has been running on for more than 1 year, and it covers the overall floor area is more than 7,500 square meters, and it has 6 main functions or roles. They are economic operation, market supervision, social management, public service, environmental protection, and social appeals. By social appeals, it means citizens can propose questions, suggestions, or complaints to the mayor or any department of Chengdu municipal government.
The realities in Lagos are, however, changing because the city administrators have commenced activities that will gradually make the city smart. Major improvements have been seen in the transportation system as the government has partnered with organizations to develop the bus rapid transport and the waterways system. Work has also commenced on the interstate rail transport project. Also, the financial services sector have experienced a lot of improvements. Many new financial technology companies have sprung up in the city, and this has improved the experience of Lagosians. Statistics shows that there are 17 million internet users in Lagos. This growth has improved the internet service provision in the city. We have seen a growth from 3G to 4G, and gradually we are moving to the 5G technology in the city. There is, however, a need for the city administrators to create a balance
Being part of a global organization, we were able to discover information well beyond our local community.
FIAPSI continues to really offer good symposium, good events, so we can continue to share ideas and knowledge.
We are trying to look at attempted steps to strengthen climate action and improve the urban environment.
We want to continue to do this because it's for the people. So we will continue to follow the legacy of all the great leaders of FIAPSI USA Hawaii Council.
Well, good day, everyone. I know this is a global greeting, so I didn't want to make it whether it's in the evening or the morning, as we have people from around the world with us today. This is I think our fourth or fifth World Cities Day, and here today we're going to take a different approach from the programs that we had earlier in the month. Those earlier programs dealt with specific programs and opportunities located not only in Hawaii, but throughout the world. Those included photovoltaic systems, wind energy, wave energy, and various other means of generating power to sustain our global cities. Today, we're going to take the 30,000 foot view of some of the programs. We're looking at some of the major issues with climate change today. And one of the big issues that we're dealing with globally, not only are the fires, but right now the floodings that's taking place, not only in California, but that took place this past summer in Europe, and also takes place annually throughout China. Before we get started, we do have an opening comment from our current president. So with that, let me introduce Timothy Yi.
Aloha and welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us today on this Adopting Cities for Climate Resilience. I'm excited to have this World Cities Day event today with colleagues and friends all over the world. And today I just, I don't want to hold up anything. We have a great speaker, great program lined up. And I just wanted to introduce our welcome speaker from Nairobi, Kenya. Live. It's about 3 o'clock in the morning, and he had to wake up and have some strong coffee to join us this morning just for this message. And oh, there he is, and we see him with aloha shirts, as you can see. He loves Hawaii, and I made a good friends with him and his family, Loie, Kawasaki, and also Megumi, their daughter, beautiful daughter. They're in Nairobi, Africa, and leading us into the right direction for all kinds of sustainable development goal and climate changes. And they're in the front line leading these global cities that we just talked about, Jeff and Bill, and everybody's always talking about making cities, better city, better life. That's the theme of the World Cities today. And thanks to Mr. Wataru Kawasaki, making things happen for us. He's the program and planning officer for UN Habitat. And I got to know him. I met him in Hawaii, met him in a UN event in New York. And he invited me over to Nairobi, Kenya a few years ago. And we were able to join him there too. So we are all over the world, trust me. And I think people like, Mr. Wataru Kawasaki making big difference. And with the FIAPSI International USA and Hawaii Council, following the lead of this UN Habitat to make cities better for the people to live in there. So thank you so much for joining us. Not to mention that that's 3 o'clock in the morning in Nairobi, Kenya. He had to wake up and have a strong coffee to wake him up and to join us today. So it is an honor. And as the UN officer, also as a great friend, good to see you. We were just dying to see you in Hawaii in person, and hopefully that we can get together pretty soon together. And I'm dying to be in Nairobi, Kenya, to see the great things that the UN Habitat is doing there as a headquarters there. So without further ado, let me introduce Mr. Wataru Kawasaki from Nairobi, Kenya, who is a program and planning officer for UN Habitat. Wataru.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Yes, it's actually 3 in the morning. My name is Wataru Kawasaki from UN Habitat. Greetings from Kenya, Nairobi. I'm so honored to be part of the World Cities Day celebration with you after actually 1 year. Last year also I was also invited to be part of the for the celebration of the World Cities Day. Taking this opportunity, I thank you all, especially FIAFC USA, Hawaii Council, and distinguished speakers for inviting me also, and also the organizing the World Cities Day. Well, as you know, this year's World Cities Day's theme is adapting cities for climate resilience, and the global observance will be co-hosted by UN Habitat and the government of Egypt, and it will take place in the city of Luxor on the 31st of October, 2021. The theme for the World Cities Day is adapting and climate change, as I said, and it is actually reflecting the fact that the climate change will have a huge impact on the cities and people and the communities, with hundreds of millions of them, experiencing the floods and the rising sea levels, storms, and natural disasters increasing over the period of this the pandemics also. But I believe Hawaii is not an exception. And nowadays, of course, impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and we need to take actions on how to recover from the COVID-19. Today, it is great opportunity for us to mark the World Cities Day to raise awareness about a sustainable urbanization and the resilience to such climate crisis as well as the pandemics. Many urban centers or cities have failed to invest in city resilience due to a lack of funding capacity, awareness, or action plans. To this end, I'm so excited to have this World Cities Day celebration today with you, business leaders, communities, and discussion on what to invest, how to finance our future of cities. Taking this opportunity also, this 11th session of the World Urban Forum, UF11, will take place in the city of Katowice, Poland in June 2022. This will be the first time that Eastern Europe will host UF11, and it brings together key influencers to shape a better urban future in transforming our cities. So the theme is also the transforming our cities. It relates to not only the climate change, poverty, other issues, but also we need to look at the future, how to transform our cities in a better way. So I'm thrilled to see how we can bring up our discussions and key recommendations today to the next level of global debates, that is the World Urban Forum. So lastly, but not least, I'm also excited to that we will have a 2022 Global Observance for World Habitat Day will be in Hawaii in 2022. So I thank the city and the county of Honolulu and the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development for the hosting the World Habitat Day 2022 also. Thank you very much. And once again, congratulations and to all, and hoping you have great discussions and good recommendations for the global platform and the way forward. Thank you very much.
Okay, well, the theme today is resilience equals reserves plus redundance and reliability. And as I mentioned before, we're going to look at it from the 30,000 foot level. To quote the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, at the meeting of leading mayors supported by the C40 cities last April, and I quote, "Cities are also on the front lines of the climate crisis. More than 500 million urban residents already face rising sea levels and more frequent and severe storms. By mid-century, more than 3.3 billion urban residents could be at risk from severe climate impacts. Cities also have an outsized carbon footprint. With just over half the global population, they emit more than 70% of global greenhouse gases. The COVID-19 pandemic is also a global catastrophe, but the investment in recovery is a generational opportunity to put climate action, clean energy, and sustainable development at the heart of cities' strategies and policies. How we design power generation, transport, and buildings in cities, how we design the cities themselves will be decisive in getting on track to achieve the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals. We need a revolution in urban planning and in urban mobility, including better fuel efficiency, zero emission vehicles, and shifts toward walking, cycling, public transport, and shorter commutes. Cities stand to gain most from phasing out coal, clean air, green outdoor spaces, and healthier people. Now, when we think about this, and these are some of the issues that we just discussed earlier this month, what we're going to do is go back in time and look at how societies and cities came to be and how they were able to conquer certain environmental concerns that they had. I think this past summer where it was really indicative when you looked at the flooding in Europe. And what we're going to do now is go back in time and look at how ancient China handled this. I want to also discuss multiple crises, implore us right now to move from just-in-time delivery to more resilient ways of living. We have seen with supply chain disruptions and outages from natural disasters, many of our cities, businesses, and homes just did not have reserves or backup plans. And that's why we want to go back and see how the ancients had done it before. As any good business knows, there is need for cash reserves on hand to cover what will certainly be additional transformative changes in the days ahead. We have also seen that having only one person or one system in place to cover critical operational needs only leads to longer and more severe disruption when the inevitable occurs. Finally, reliability of service, trustworthy partners, and a commitment to the social good must find a new prominence in our standard operating procedures. We have a short COP26 Climate Summit video that we would like you to enjoy at this time.
The COP26 conference in Glasgow this November is going to be the most important climate summit in years. But what actually is a COP? And why does this one matter so much? Here's what you need to know. COP stands for Conference of the Parties. It's an opportunity for negotiators from nearly 200 countries to come together, review their progress on climate change, and decide on the best way to move forward. The ultimate goal is to emerge at the end of the two-week conference with a text or a set of texts outlining what happens next. But it hasn't always worked out that way.
Mr. President, our future is not for sale.
L9 asked Africa to sign a suicide pact.
These summits have taken place since 1995. And while they have gotten bigger over the years with climate NGOs, governments, and activists using the COP as a platform for campaigns and media attention, meanwhile, the government negotiators often work through the night and into overtime, struggling to reach consensus. Probably the biggest success story came in 2015, when COP members agreed to the Paris Climate Accord. This aims to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees centigrade, compared to pre-industrial levels, and ideally to 1.5 degrees. But to reach that target, countries will have to set new climate commitments ahead of this year's COP and really put the Paris Accord into action. For years, scientists have said the best weapon against rising temperatures is to cut greenhouse gas emissions. And working toward legally binding emissions reductions has been a priority of COP meetings since the mid-90s.
We agree on our common goal, cut global emissions by 45% by 2030 from 2010 levels, and achieve net zero emissions by 2050.
But current climate pledges aren't anywhere close to achieving this. In fact, they're moving in the opposite direction. A recent UN report estimated that by 2030, greenhouse gas emissions are likely to be 16% higher than they were in 2010. That puts the world on track for almost 3 degrees of global warming by the end of the century. This would dramatically change climatic conditions on the planet, making extreme weather events more common and potentially pushing the Earth past tipping points that would speed up warming even further.
If we continue on our current path, we will face the collapse of everything that gives us our security.
To avoid that scenario and keep 1.5 degrees of warming within reach, those who sign the Paris Accord are supposed to update and strengthen their emissions targets, or nationally determined contributions, in a bit of COP jargon, every 5 years. And this COP is the first official deadline for countries to do that since Paris. Coal is the most polluting form of power. It accounts for about 45% of energy-related CO2 emissions. And at COP26, it has definitely got a target on its back.
If we are serious about 1.5 degrees, Glasgow must be the COP that consigns coal power to history.
Recently, China and G7 countries all agreed to stop funding coal-fired power stations overseas, but domestic coal use still continues. According to the International Energy Agency, the level of coal production forecast for 2050 is about 4 times the limit needed to reach net zero emissions by the middle of the century. And before everyone is willing to give up coal entirely, another issue will have to be resolved first: money. Decarbonizing the world's economy by the middle of this century is going to cost trillions of dollars. And the question of who should pay for it has been a big sticking point for climate talks since even before the Paris Agreement.
The major emitters in the industrial countries must take the major responsibility for the past and the major responsibility as we go forward.
In 2009, rich countries promised to contribute $100 billion each year by 2020 to help developing nations cut their emissions and manage the impact of rising seas, failing crops, and other climate-related disasters. But according to the latest figures from the OECD, rich nations provided less than $80 billion of climate finance in 2019. And even though developing countries say they need the money if they are going to reach their climate goals, the $100 billion target may not be met before Glasgow gets underway. All the tools needed to curb global temperature rise are on the table at COP26, from the phasing out of coal to meeting climate finance and setting new emissions targets. In fact, more countries have net zero emissions targets now than ever before, covering nearly 2/3 of the global economy. But those targets have to be backed up by policies if they are going to turn into action. That's why the stakes are so high at COP26 and why all eyes will be on Glasgow this November.
All right, and now you see the problems that we face today. And the question is, can we, the humans on this planet, be able to solve these problems? Well, what we're going to do now is take a look back with the ancients to find out how they started these societies and cultures and how they developed both in Europe and in Asia. Of course, you could also look at places like the Babylonians or the Egyptians and how they developed their cultures. But we have some particular concerns today because of the flooding that is taking place both in Europe, in the United States, and in Asia. Asia has had to deal with this for many, many generations. They have major rivers, just as Europe does. In Europe, you have the Rhine and the Danube and several other key rivers. In Egypt, you had the Nile and the other major rivers in both India and in the Middle East. But the ones that we're going to talk about first are those that come out of China, from an area that most Westerners know very little about. But this is really part of the cradle of civilization in China, a small area near the Sichuan, which stands for 4 rivers, by the way. at the foothills of the Tibetan Plateau, where many powerful rivers come through the mountains from all of the snow-capped peaks in that area. And back 2,000 years ago, almost 2,200 years ago, at the very same time as the Roman Empire started to get going, an emperor in the small empire of Qin went to war with his neighbors. This is during the Warring States period in China. And his first target was not the northern plateaus or the big barren desert areas, but south of him was the Yangtze River and north of him was the Yellow River. And so in looking for resources, natural resources, they looked to the south and saw the kingdom of Ba and the kingdom of Shu at the foothills of the mountains where these rushing rivers and streams flew out over alluvial plains. The problem with these plains was that it was uncontrollable for flooding and damage to crops. So this particular king sent out a district governor by the name of Li Bing, and he went into this mountainous area just north of the city of Chengdu to study it and find out how we can harness nature, how we can control these floods. Not too different from what Charlemagne had to deal with on the Rhine River and in the alluvial plains in Northern Europe. And so what this fellow did was about 2,200 years ago, devised a system to control some of the major rivers there, to spread the damage and get rid of the silt and rocks and stones and have the water flow in a new direction across these alluvial plains, watering this large, vast area of land. This vast area of land was at one time always subject to floods and horrible storms. What happened here, it became really a rich farming area. And it's now today called the land of abundance, where crops, just like the Central Valley in California or the wheat fields in Nebraska, have just flourished and created an entire society. The major cities coming out of there were Chongqing and Chengdu, the old capitals. What happened here was, while the water flowed every year, it was just random all over the place and just destroyed all of the farming communities. This governor was able to devise a mechanical hydroelectric system of water weirs that could direct the flow of the water and channel it across into these fertile plains. It was not an easy feat, as he had to blast through mountains and rock in order to do this. He created 3 channels for the flow of this water so that it just didn't flow into the Yangtze River and out all the way down to Shanghai. Later on, you will obviously understand they built the 3 gorgeous dams, but that was thousands of years later. This was the first attempt in the land of pandas, up in the mountains, a place called Duzhangyang. And with that, we're going to have a short video to explain some of the history, how Duzhangyang started to control the water supply and the abundance of crops in southwest central China, and how that eventually helped Qin Shi Huangdi, the emperor, take over all of the rest of China. It's now named after him, from Qin to China.
A historic story of irrigation solutions, October 24th, 2016. Duzhangyang Irrigation Project, from Qin to China. Why China was united by the Kingdom of Qin. Since 221 BC, China has been united to be one nation by the Kingdom of Qin. The civilization of China has been going through until today, with no stop ever. about why it was Qin, a small kingdom located in the west corner, could conquer many kingdoms and made Qin to be China. In 310 BC, Qin made a strategy, firstly, to conquer the kingdom of Ba and Chu at the upstream of the Yangtze River, and then conquer the kingdom of Chu by the convenient transportation of the Yangtze River. After that, conquer all other kingdoms. In 256 BC, Qin conquered Ba and Chu. They decided to make the upstream area, Chengdu Plain, as the agricultural production area for their further wars. The king of Qin dispatched Mr. Li Bing to be the governor of Chengdu for the development of agriculture. At that time, Chengdu Plain was divided into two parts by Minjiang River, which is a branch of Yangtze River. Minjiang River originated from the Min Mountains. It flew through the Chengdu Plain and joined Yangtze. At the upstream of the Minjiang River, there was a mountain named Yulei. The river was blocked by this mountain and could not flow into Chengdu Plain. But Big Flood always brought disasters to the people and crops at the North River bank because of the silting problem. Mr. Li Bing and his son decided to open a canal at Yulei Mountain and led the river into the plain by gravity. Mr. Li Bing started this project at the bending point of Minjiang upstream. They put rocks into bamboo cages and threw thousands of these cages into the river to create an artificial dam, like a fish mouth. One side of the fish mouth was called the inner river, deep and narrow. The other side was called outer river, shallow and wide. So during dry season, about 60% of the water flew into the inner river and 40% into the outer river. During rainy season, 40% of the water flew into the inner river and 60% into the outer river. However, they had to open a canal on this mountain. The mountain was huge, with all hard rocks. If only by men laborers, it would be very difficult, even impossible. Mr. Li Bing asked the people to fire the rocks by wood and pour water onto the hot rocks. The rocks cracked and split by themselves, thus made the work going easier and faster. After 8 years, they made a huge canal with 80 meters in length, 20 meters in width, and 40 meters in height, called the bottleneck. The water flew into this bottleneck by gravity at 330 cubic meters per second. When the water flew to this bending point, it turned around counterclockwise at the river cross-section by the force of the main stream. The water flew spirally forward. When the water came to the artificial dam, all mud and sands under the water were thrown to the outer river. Only clean water on the top could flow into the inner river. But there were always some mud and sands that needed to be discharged. Mr. Li lowered the end of the river and called it sending flying. Mud and sands would fly from this river and flow into the outer river. The clean water flew into the canal. Even so, the mud and sands would still build up at the inner river. In each dry season, people had to clear the river bottom. Li Bing put a stone course under the river as a standard depth mark. The workers would not stop digging up the mud and sands until they saw the stone course. No more, no less. After this project finished in the year 248 BC, Minjiang River kept flowing from the canal into Chengdu Plain. It irrigated 200,000 hectares of farmland. The previous driveway became fertile. The Chengdu Plain became the kingdom of paradise with no drought, no hunger. Now, his military army. He started wars against the other 6 kingdoms. Qin's army force wiped out millions of the enemy troops. 230 BC, conquered Han. 225 BC, conquered Wei. 223 BC, conquered Qin. 222 BC, conquered Zhao and Yin. 221 BC, conquered Qi. Finally, Qin established the first United Nations in the year 221 BC. The country's name, China, originated from Qin.
All right, thank you. What you just saw there was ancient human beings figuring out solutions to create their society on the riverbanks of the Minjiang River. Today, this place is so incredibly successful and is now a high-tech development hub for all of China. Some of the products that come out of there originally were all agriculture, but today, Foxconn and Apple all have a number of plants cranking out iPad Airs and other software programs for all of the world. Now, how did this come about? How did this transform China? And obviously, if human beings can handle this, why can't we handle the climate crisis issues that we have today? As we all know, China went through a period of using 90% coal until they started to build additional hydroelectric dams and tried to harness the environment. Now, there are pluses and minuses to that. As you will see in this short additional video that we have, Chengdu today will show you some of the ecological developments and some of the environmental concerns that they have addressed, so that now it's nearly a clean, blue city, safe or green energy city with basically the water resources and high-tech energy being used to develop high-tech industries throughout the world. So we have another short video. The reason why I'm doing all of this talking is because all of the city officials in Chengdu have been tied up with several other major projects for them. The World University Games and their sister city music festival were all happening this week. And so it was very difficult to get them to be able to break away. So they asked me to just fill in for them and to talk about the project that they're so proud of. This very area where where Dujiangyang is exactly where the pandas are. And so it's become a fertile ground for all kinds of endangered species and animals. So I want to show you a little bit about where Chengdu was in Sichuan province and what it's like today. This is some of the music festival that took place just this last weekend. The Office of Foreign Affairs in Chengdu apologizes for not being able to be here presently. They will certainly participate in the future. So let's look at Chengdu today. So there you have it. This is one of the city and county of Honolulu's major sister cities in Asia. We have 6 university relationships with most of their major universities where their students are coming to Hawaii and our students are going to that portion of China. A lot of it is on ecological and economic development at Southwest University, Sichuan University, Shinan Jiao Tong University. All of those have relations with the University of Hawaii here. And their major concern, some of those parks that you saw are right next to runways. It's incredible, but yet they're able to place the lakes and ponds away from the runways so that the birds stay away from the actual flight paths. And they've taken all of that land underneath the runways for other kinds of animals to survive, and you can wander through all of them. Toward the end there, you did see Dujiangyang, which is where the water weir is, and it's now a developing community. You also saw in there several of our Hawaii actors and singers participating this last summer, which then got canceled until now because of COVID. But they're also handling all of the COVID issues, and pretty much just as Hawaii has. They're very similar in approach for mask wearing and vaccination. So that's the end of the portion for Chengdu. We wanted to show you how humankind could develop solutions for their economic well-being and pollution issues to become a modern city today. So if there are any questions, otherwise we will move on to a video on Rotterdam.
Water represents one of the biggest threats posed by climate change. That's because rising seas, stronger storms, and heavier rainfall could massively increase flooding by the end of the century. It's already starting to happen, and it's very likely to get worse.
Catastrophic flooding in Western Europe after violent storms and powerful floodwaters destroying entire towns.
It's easy to feel overwhelmed looking at footage like this. It seems like no one has any idea what to do about this problem, so we're just going to see more and more damaging floods year after year. But there is one place where it's possible to imagine a very different future.
When you look at the city of Rotterdam, the water is in our genes, you could say. We are already working for 1,000 years on this topic.
Keeping the water out isn't a new challenge for the Netherlands. It's a battle they've been fighting for centuries. So when the effects of climate change started to crop up, they were like, yeah, let's do this, we're ready. We traveled to Rotterdam to find out how this city is getting ready for the future, and whether the ingenious stuff they've come up with will ultimately be enough to save them. And hopefully the rest of us too.
When you look at Holland or the Netherlands, the name the Netherlands already says that we are a low-lying country. 1/3 of this country is below sea level and 2/3 is vulnerable to flooding.
Back in the day, the only things keeping the water at bay were the dikes, which are basically just raised mounds of earth. Once every few decades, the water would overwhelm the dikes and cause catastrophic flooding. And that was just the way things were. Until one day in 1953, all that suddenly changed.
In 1953, it was a disaster. I was 5 years now, and I lived on a farm. There was no radio, so people didn't know where we were.
A powerful storm struck the southern coast, overwhelming dikes that had been badly damaged in the Second World War. On the morning of February 1st, 1953, Kosa's father and brother woke him up and told him what had happened.
They say how everything is over and your mother and sister are out.
in 1953, almost 2,000 people died. And that was the moment for us, we said this can never happen again. That's the time we started making our first barrier.
The flood galvanized the Dutch government to build the world's most powerful flood defense system, the Delta Works. It was a series of modernized dams and storm surge barriers that took more than 40 years to complete.
And the final act of the Delta Works is the barrier over here, the Mausoleum Barrier, made to protect Rotterdam. We're looking at the biggest movable storm surge barrier in the world. It's the same size as the Eiffel Tower. So you're looking at an Eiffel Tower laying on its side.
Most of the time, the barrier stays open so ships can pass through. When a storm comes along, it snaps shut, preventing the storm surge from traveling upriver and flooding Rotterdam. The movable design was radical when it was completed in 1997, and it's inspired similar structures in flood-prone cities around the world.
If you look at St. Petersburg in Russia, a small version of this barrier has been made over there. And maybe in the future, in front of Manhattan, they're thinking about a way to protect that also. So this was the first one, and now smaller versions are coming all over the world.
But the barrier on its own isn't enough to keep Rotterdam from flooding.
Talking about climate change, we see an increase of more intensive rainfall. We already are facing now and then small-scale flooding, so we need more places where we can store this water.
Arnoud Molenaar is also working to keep Rotterdam dry, not by keeping the water out, but by giving it a place to go.
This is the water square, and it is actually, you could say, a symbol for our approach how to become climate adaptive. So under normal circumstances, this square can be used as, for example, a basketball field.
But on days like this, it stores excess rainwater and keeps it from flooding the streets.
So it's a multifunctional solution. We want to add quality to the urban space, but in this way we are also adding water storage. This is the first water square that we have been developing, but it's part of a bigger package of measures. An interesting one close by here is what we call the duck park, or the rooftop park, which is a kind of a long levee of 1 kilometer, and on top of it a huge green park. It's storing excessive rainwater because of the green roof.
Looking at the challenges related to climate change, a lot of people think it's going to cost us a lot of space and money. And we try to show that you also can use it to work on a better city.
In some ways, the Dutch are just as baffled as the rest of us about climate change. For one thing, there's the question of what happens when sea levels rise beyond a certain point. The Mausoleum Barrier was built to withstand 1 meter of sea level rise, and a redesigned barrier could potentially handle even more than that. But there's only so much that even Dutch engineering can do.
Beyond 2 meters, it's difficult. We are working on new scenarios. Suppose it will be more than 2 meters, 4 meters, 5 meters. Then what? People ask me, will you be moving on a certain moment in time to the higher grounds in the Netherlands? I can't imagine that that will be a decision.
For survivors like Koos, on the other hand, it's not so hard to imagine the worst.
Nobody will to realize that there will be an end of nice life here, I think. We all will be refugees.
I think in 300 years, Rotterdam will still be here. But when the sea level will rise 4 or 5 meters, we will have to find additional solutions.
Any idea what those would be?
Maybe on a larger scale invest in floating districts, floating cities.
And that brings us to our final and most radical solution.
My name is Koen Oldhuis. I'm a water architect. For the last 15 years, we've been building floating homes in cities that face climate change and sea level rise. So we have the floating home, which has a floating foundation, and it can move up and down the fluctuation of the river. But to keep it on one spot, we have these kind of stilts. The water will come up, and you will see that the house will move up, 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 and if the water goes down, it just guides it back. 100 years ago, you see cities start to grow up with high-rise buildings because they saw the space in the air. Well, we see the city has to grow underwater. It's not only about houses, it's about floating apartment buildings, floating roads, floating parks, all the kind of urban components you need to make your city more waterproof.
Who knows? Maybe someday we'll all live in floating houses. Or maybe something entirely new will come along. Preparing for climate change is a tough challenge, but for the innovators of Rotterdam, it's a process of adaptation that never ends.
It's not finished, our project. It keeps on going. It's an ongoing process. I feel safe, my children will feel safe, and my grandchildren will also feel safe. But after that, you have to think again.
All right. Now, Bill, would you like to say anything about Rotterdam before we move on?
No, I think it was really exciting for us to kind of see the parallels between China and the solutions of what we can do. I think that's one of our main issues is we want to talk about what we can do and not just what the problems are, and see that things have actually 2,000 years ago and 10 years ago, and so we're moving forward with our guests from Europe. So let's move on.
Okay, I'm going to interject one comment. We talked about 2,000 years ago. We're talking about today. I'm going to interject one thing about 1,000 years ago. A fellow by the name of Charlemagne was in this very area, a Frankish king that eventually tried to harness some of these rivers and created the Holy Roman Empire. So in between, you see all of this development occurring in these vital river systems. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce my dear friend, Nicholas Pillay, who is the public affairs officer for the general representative of Flanders. By the way, Flanders is pretty darn close to Rotterdam. The city of Antwerp is one of its major seaports, one of the largest in all of Europe, located right next door. And Nicholas is actually a graduate of the famous Flemish University, the University of Ghent. I believe he has 2 degrees from this prestigious institution in such a wonderful, beautiful city that I have also visited. So without further ado, let me introduce Nicholas Pillay from the government of Flanders, Belgium.
Thank you, Jeff, and of course, thank you for inviting me to join this panel. Of course, as an honorary consul of Belgium, you've proven your worth time and time again, so we're very happy to have you on our team, so to speak. And of course, I want to wish everyone a happy World Cities Day here on the panel and those watching at home. My name is Nicholas Paulette, Director of Public Affairs at the Delegation of Flanders, Belgium, based in New York City. So good morning, good day, and good evening for the people on the East Coast. So yes, thank you, Bill, for this video of the story of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. It's a story very familiar to us, both Flanders being the northern Dutch-speaking region of Belgium, and the Netherlands, are known internationally as the Delta region, and we also go on economic missions and abroad to promote our expertise and our professionalism when it comes to water management and the blue economy. So that's why, as a part of my talk here, I'll also mention the Port of Antwerp, which of course, as Jeff correctly mentioned, basically together with Rotterdam, and the city of Antwerp. The two ports are the largest port area in Europe. So, but before I get to that, I'll just say make some brief remarks on the occasion of a World Cities Day and what cities mean to our government, to our region, to our country. So, as I said, Flanders is the northern Dutch-speaking region of Belgium. Out of Belgium's 11 million inhabitants, a stunning 97% can be considered urban as living in cities. I mean, so Belgium is really one of the most urbanized centers in the world. So we're a collection of cities with different sizes, but all have mutual relationships. And of that, Flanders has a population of about 6.5 million people. So the average population density this year was 1,263 inhabitants per square mile. And just to compare with 20 years ago, in the year 2000, we had 1,100 inhabitants per square mile. So that's a little more than 100 people per square mile in 20 years. So this is a trend that's common to a lot of cities, noting that population growth happens alongside climate change, which of course is a big challenge for our cities. So looking at our long-standing history of urbanization, and I'm sure Jeff will appreciate that since the Middle Ages, basically Flanders has been the center of urbanized living, thinking of the medieval cities of Bruges and Ghent, my alma mater, and of course Antwerp as well. So the population in the cities grows much faster than that in the countryside. So such a development has perpetrated what they call nebular urbanity, meaning as a spatial structure consisting of a central core and many small and medium-sized urban centers fragmented by open space in between them. So through urbanization, conditions and therefore trends differ widely between Flanders and the other part of Belgium. Some overreaching trends are detectable. Most significant of those is urban sprawl, which I'm sure a lot of the UN habitat experts here will know a lot about, grounded in a history of suburbanization and commuting going back as far as the 19th century. Sprawl nowadays leads to tax distortion, noise pollution, poor air quality, and many other challenges. I just want to touch briefly on the current pandemic as well, the global health crisis, because of course that also has a major impact on our society and especially on our cities. The consequences of the pandemic in various domains such as health, economy, and mobility quickly became more apparent and rose maybe even quicker to the surface than before the coronavirus hit. But as we've heard in many videos and by the other panelists, we saw a lot of creativity and resilience. So just a few examples of that. People opted en masse for bicycles rather than cars. The streets without traffic jams gave local residents breathing space again. And of course, solidarity actions had great resonance within the business community. Local businesses flourished and the sense of belonging in our urban centers really did increase. And of course, I'm talking about Belgium now, but even in my hometown here in New York City, you also noticed that. So that brings along a lot of questions, some where I don't have the answer on either, but questions like, can we anchor these changes for the long term, right? So for the Sustainable Development Goals, goals set by the United Nations in 2030, 2050. The Corona crisis forces us to reflect on the position and the resilience of cities within society. A return to the old normal would be a missed opportunity. But what would a city look like after Corona? And then I just want to touch briefly on sustainable urbanism, this thinking of long-term living in urban centers and just not coming up with solutions for the short term. but thinking, decades, centuries from now even. So sustainable urbanism is so much more than building energy efficient houses, green spaces in the city, or working on sustainable urban mobility. The changes required to meet the climate challenges are fundamentally intertwined with almost all components of our lifestyle, our way of making policy, our political system, and our economic organization, which was mentioned in the introduction to this panel, economic development, how important that is to the solution. So it will not be enough to just do things better. We will also have to do things radically different and approach the climate transition from a multi-level governance logic to see how it translates to different domains within our society. And therefore, Flanders and the local governments are joining forces in order to realize necessary transition in energy and climate policy. And then finally, if you will allow me, I'll just want to touch briefly on the port of Antwerp, just kind of a good example that really complements the video we just saw of the port of Rotterdam and the wonderful innovative solutions the Dutch colleagues have come up with. So just to give you some context, Port of Antwerp is the second largest port in Europe. It's one of the top 20 ports in the world. Basically, it generates 10 to 15% of Belgium's total CO2 emissions. And it has set itself a very ambitious goal to be climate neutral by 2050. So it's a really good example of I think, of a sustainable example in an urban context. And of course, linking this example with Hawaii, surrounded by water, I just really think this was something I'd really like to share with everyone here. So almost 3/4 of all goods in Belgium are transported by road. This puts a great deal of pressure on our planet and our society. So just think of the air pollution, traffic deaths, hour of traffic jams, and by 2030, transport will grow by almost a quarter. So that's unsustainable and has to change. So as I mentioned, the Port of Antwerp is Flanders' economic engine, and they want future generations to be able to enjoy prosperity and create jobs as well. That's why we're working on to making the port a sustainable port by consciously choosing sustainable growth and putting people, the surroundings, and the climate first. And one way of doing this, and I'll be emphasizing this one way. Of course, there's many ways, and there's 17 sustainable development goals to look into. But one way, of course, is to that the Port of Antwerp in 2019 set out a goal for themselves to double the share of freight transported by rail from 7 to 15% by 2030. So rail is a sustainable solution, meaning a train transport by trains. A freight train takes an average of 50 trucks off the road. So that's 50. So one freight train takes 50 trucks off the road, which is a pretty impressive figure. It also emits 9 times less CO2, causes 8 times less of air pollution, and is 6 times more energy efficient, and of course reduces road congestion, and traffic jams is something I know all about here in New York City. So something that is also in the interest of the road transport sector. So to put less pressure on our planet, finally, economy and mobility, it's important to transport more goods by rail. That would be a model shift, but it can only be done through cooperation and partnerships. All the players involved in the logistics chain, such as terminals, companies that want to transport their goods, forwarders, and of course, also the government, play a very important role in this. So I'll end my remarks here and perhaps take any questions that people might have. I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Nicholas. If there are any questions, by all means, speak up. In the meantime, I would want to point out a few additional things to add to what Nicholas said. Most people don't realize, but the port of Antwerp and Brussels, the capital, in between, is a city that has been created by Pfizer to produce many of the vaccines that ended up in the United States to help us. They were at the forefront of developing these vaccines right there in Flanders, in Belgium. Please keep in mind also that it's only indicative of 1/3, about half of Brussels, Belgium, because the other half is the French half, and in Brussels itself is the headquarters for the for the EU, and also for the SHAEF, the Supreme Allied Command. And so the country of Belgium plays such a major role in European stability and history, and we're very pleased and happy to have Nicholas participate in this event today. So if there are any questions, let us know. Otherwise, we will move on and listen to Bill's presentation in Africa.
Well, thank you very much for everyone's contribution. It's very exciting, I think, for us to really, as we've done, is just really think about the whole planet, and Asia, Europe, and now Africa. And so as Wataru was, it's 3 a.m. in our colleagues in Ghana and Nigeria, I believe, are an hour or so. So it is the middle of the night there. So they weren't able to join us. But I just got back from West Africa. And it was really, really an exciting time to be, in spite of numerous challenges for COVID testing and COVID testing and COVID testing and COVID testing and COVID testing. I was able to speak. You see here the photo. This is the Africa Real Estate Congress conference and expo that took place in Accra, Ghana. And it was really an exciting opportunity as these markets are emerging into the world. So kind of coming from the ancient Chinese to the European and Charlemagne, all the way to now the development that's happening in Africa, and how we can be innovative in Africa and hopefully try to avoid some of the mistakes. In other words, we don't want Africa to have to go through all of the processes and mistakes that have been made as far as climate goes. And so it's a really interesting challenge to kind of think of that and see what we can do to really move forward. I was really intrigued as I was there. It was just so interesting to me to see there's a gentleman there from Land Afrique, and he's from Portugal. So he is a European from Portugal who had been hired by the Chinese to go into Angola and manage their projects and their property projects there, because of course Angola is a Portuguese colony. He spoke Portuguese, so the Chinese needed him to go in and look at their projects and run them for him. And after that, he did move and is now in Ghana working on this project in Nigeria. And so interestingly, these ideas here that we talked about in Ghana at the project, we had several different government ministers who were there. We had several private companies and brokers and developers all talking about these same things, about how we can really move into the future with the idea of taking care of the planet and ingenuity. So this idea of resilience, it's very interesting because he's now managing a project for this family in Africa that has been developed for 45 years. And so for 45 years, they have been developing this land, and kind of going back to what we talked about in a previous issues is affordable housing. And so they realized, of course, that what they needed to do was, all of these companies are in Africa and they have an industrial park. And so of course the idea before was, oh, well, we have this industrial park and people will just have to drive to be there. And they realized very quickly that they're going to have to build housing and communities for the people that work in these factories. And so going back to Nicholas and talking about the trains, about really rethinking back when we talked about the 15-minute city. And are we really going to have people have to commute for an hour and a half? Or are we going to develop these communities so that there's agriculture, there's parks, there's school, there's housing, all of this provided by the cooperation of the industrial tenants who have their factories and warehouses and things there, the local municipality, which realizes it needs to really rethink how things are done, and then the people there. And so making sure, he in his presentation, he was really talking about this idea of resilience. And so what we're talking about is, particularly in Africa, you have to have at least 3 backup plans. There is no, we just, as we were thinking about this and looking at what COVID has had, and New York flooding, and wait a minute, there's a hurricane in New York, the subways are flooding, wait a minute, what happened? How do we prepare for this? And so this idea of how we really start to move into a resilient world, which means we have to have backup plans. We can no longer not have reserves, not only cash reserves, but also reserves of systems. And so this idea of how we move into, the classic word redundant. Nobody wants to be made redundant. That's a word that means, oh, you're redundant, so you lost your job. But then if we only have one person who knows how to do something, or one system, then maybe we need to rethink this whole idea of not having a backup plan. And then finally, the idea here of reliability. And I think that's really one of the things that we want to come out of today with is what does resilience really mean for us? And what does it mean to be resilient? And I think the twin crises of the health crisis and the environmental crises, not to mention numerous other things, give us an inflection point at this point in time. So I'm very excited for the presentations that we had from Jeff and Nicholas. And I really think, we want to look at this as a solution place. How do we come up with the solutions so that we've seen that mankind has always been able to do it? There's no reason why we can't be just as ingenious as our previous in China, as first and Rotterdam and Antwerp and all of those places. So it's really, really exciting for us today to kind of take this opportunity to reflect on what we can do. And I don't know if Jeff, you have anything, or Nicholas, you want to add anything?
There, I do have a few comments I'd like to make. Nick did point out that Belgium is shifting from sea and trucks to rail. China is doing likewise, and we here in the United States are slow to figure that out. And it's a crying shame, as I got stuck in New York City traffic trying to get up to Connecticut and Boston the other week. Trying to get out of New York City, and the choice was either train, which were very few, or automobile. And I think the Northeast corridor in the United States really needs to take a second look at getting lots of those cars off the road and further developing Amtrak or some other solution for carrying freight up in the Northeast corridor. If you go to China today, I was in Qinghuandao over on the coast, north outside of Tianjin and Beijing. Every highway had photovoltaic cells and a little windmill spinning around to generate power for every single lamppost. Alongside of it were high-speed rail, brand new high-speed rail, and that gave them plenty of room for ecological parks and flyways for birds and other animals to travel. And so they're trying to blend the whole human race along with the animal kingdom to survive in the future. And a lot of this was all photovoltaic
with the city and
systems. And so we need to catch up here in the United States and in other parts of the world. I believe it all can happen, and some of these countries need to lead the way. So go ahead, Nicholas, if you have anything to add, we'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Belgium has the most close-knit train network in Europe, and obviously we are together through Rotterdam and Antwerp. We're basically, the gateway to Europe, quite literally to the rural area and the industrial heartland of Germany. So in our roads are getting closed off, not literally, but basically through the all of Europe passes through us with trucks. So it really adds a lot of pollution and challenges for mobility. So we have because of our economic position, which is very beneficial for us, but of course it has these negative effects on our environment, on air, and our mobility. So in that sense, we really are pushing hard for public transportation and train. And on a personal level, I would say it's also kind of a mentality shift. I think government can issue, policies, and we can take the advice of multilateral organizations such as UN Habitat, of course, experts in their field. But basically, there has to come a mentality shift by the population to understand that, well, if I'm going to the bakery or to the 7-Eleven, 5 minutes away, that you don't get in your car anymore, but you would take a bicycle. So I think the electric bikes is a good first step. But there's really this mental shift that, in a lot of countries in Europe, Denmark, the Netherlands, Belgium, you really have that people are like, okay, I'll go on foot or I'll go on bike. And they're not thinking about, oh, I'm going in my car. But I feel in a lot of places here in the stateside, that mentality has not set in. So, and that's a challenge for governments, a challenge for society, how to, even with the best intention, have really convince people, persuade people to, let go of their car a little bit more.
Well, and it's very exciting because I have been, my speech over the last 6 months has been, to reuse what we already have. These rail corridors already exist. The river here in Chicago, we've returned to the river. We used to turn our back on the river, and now we have cafes, and so the idea that somehow this all has to be recreated is actually a false idea. These corridors, particularly in the Northeast, are already there. And it's a matter, I think, Nicholas, you're exactly right, of the public mindset turning to how we can make this transition to these areas, whether it's the trains, high-speed rail, and all of those kinds of things, because I'll never, ever forget when I first was in, I believe it was Amsterdam, and saw the parking garage for bicycles. And there was like 700 bicycles in the parking. I looked and was like, and that's all bicycles. And so I think, as we kind of look forward to these solutions, one of the things we're looking at is continuing these partnerships so that we can all learn from each other what has happened, in particular in Asia and Europe, and some of the cutting edge stuff that has happened there. And so that was our purpose. So it's very exciting.
Yep, that's a good point. The bicycle and walking, it's also healthier.
And cheaper.
Very true.
Right. And in China, at one point, they were all fields of bicycles. Now they're all becoming electric bicycles as an adjunct to transportation modes. And some of these, the United States, we all need to observe and see how other countries are doing it. So it's going to be really important to see what comes out of this current administration when they return from Glasgow in 2 weeks. So we should open it up. Does anyone have any other comments or any questions? Now's the time.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
This morning, the Global Housing Foundation celebrated United Nations Habitat Day. And one of the points that was brought out, and I think I'm glad, Nicholas, that you talked about the change of mindset. Education was one of the factors that was brought out in one of the examples that they gave. they educated the population so that they could buy into the fact of what climate change. Well, this is a major issue. A lot of people don't really believe in climate change. They don't really understand the effect of jumping into their vehicle and driving that, the few blocks. I guess one of the questions I have for you is, how do you think that mindset could be changed, or how I know already that mindset has changed in your area, but maybe you can shed a little bit more in terms of how your population is viewing all of this.
I think that's addressed to you, Nick.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Judy. I appreciate the question. I think basically, I mean, it's hard for me to speak about all of Europe, but I'll speak about my experiences in Belgium. Is basically one of it is cost prohibitive. Basically, gasoline is more expensive in Europe. I know if you're following the news here, of course, it's getting up there as well in America. But basically, still driving is cheap here. So I think that's something. Taxes, right? How cars are taxed more. So basically, there's an economic incentive to using your bike, walking for the shorter distances. So I think that's one. But of course, that might not be popular with voters, let's say, specific in specific states. And then I think infrastructure also, right? I mean, to bike and to walk, you need bicycle paths, you need footpaths, and then you need, safety wise, right? You need lighting and make sure that you'll be able to cross the street correctly. So that's something that I feel is definitely lacking. But a city like New York has been doing, has made great strides in the years that I've been living here to kind of create a green thoroughfare around the island of Manhattan, basically, which is exclusively for cars, for bikes and roller skaters and all of that. So, and then maybe a third example, which is kind of also an infrastructure example, but also has to do with, let's say, economic development and small businesses, is basically the, closing inner cities for cars. So, of course, in Europe, we kind of have a medieval city plan. So people, expert in real estate and urban planning will appreciate this. Basically, from a small village with a few houses around the church that grew and grew and grew and grew over hundreds of years, thousands of years, even into what it is today. So that inner city really got clogged up, and a lot of European cities have chosen, and towns as well, chosen to make those inner cities car free. So of course, on certain times, vans can pass, so that the small and medium-sized businesses can have their supplies delivered and things like that. So that's, of course, a big, good policy in the sense like, well, if you're not allowed to drive there, then you have no other choice but to bike or walk or take the tram or trolley, whatever it might be. So I hope those are kind of few examples that might ignite some imagination.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, this COVID. So here in Chicago, a good 3 years ago, I ran around talking about how we have to eliminate cars and cars got to go away. I never really thought it would happen, but here, because of COVID and the businesses and people that eat outdoors, they've closed off streets. They've closed off several blocks of streets, and the restaurants are putting their cafe chairs out and little tents and heaters, even here in the winter as it gets colder. And so I was obviously, again, there are lots of challenges here, but to actually see that it is actually possible to close off a street. And so now that we have experienced it here, I think a lot of people in the neighborhoods are going, why would we open this street back up? Let's keep it closed. And so that idea of people and the community that has happened, because I think it was talked about before about how these crises have brought us to bring community together. and to realize we are really in this together. So just a few blocks from our condo is a street that's closed off to the restaurants, and we go down there Fridays and Saturday nights. It's lovely. It's a carnival atmosphere. And you every once in a while see a car that's trying to figure out, wait a minute, where am I supposed to go? And it's like, well, not here, go away.
Yeah, I believe that's happening in New York also, right, Nick?
Yes, that's the case with the COVID. They have now outdoor dining. So I think the mayor prolonged that policy till 2022, and then they'll reevaluate it. And it's also a source of income, of course, for the city, because the restaurants and bars will have to pay a fee. But there, I think it's probably a battle between, there's the parking tickets, what makes most money, maybe. But I can't speak for New York City government, obviously.
Jeff, this is Jack.
Yes, Jack.
I think it also calls for businesses to restructure their working hours. See what happened during the pandemic? Like there was no cars on the street in Honolulu. And it was so beautiful. Everybody was staying home. Nobody likes to drive. And just from here, Kapolei to Honolulu is probably take about 15 minutes to drive, no traffic. So it's doable, but we don't have to wait for a pandemic, whatever, to think about better solutions to our problems. So it can be done, the pandemic has told us that it can be done. So businesses, I think, should really restructure the working hours. Some would work at home and maybe, only work 3 times a week, whatever, go to work. And then you lessen traffic, and there is a synergy of everything that would happen,
That, in fact, is happening right now. The discussions in Honolulu, with most of the major financial institutions, it's on the plate for all of the board of directors and human resources departments. Who can they bring back into the offices? Who can stay at home? Where do you have the synergy to have people in the office? Can they do likewise on Zoom calls? So that's all being discussed this very moment. And I think it'll all start to shake out through 2022 as to who's actually going to have to come into the office and who can actually be effective at home. Yes.
That's great. That's awesome.
All right. I think there's another comment here. Let's see. Oh, yeah. So Lisa Van den Heuvel actually said that, yes, the pandemic has forced us to change. And that is true. We should take advantage of this opportunity because there's a gap in thinking right now, and people can make the adjustments, and some of the companies are just doing so this very moment. So we look forward to seeing how that shakes out in the future. All right, if there are no further questions, we do have another short video, I believe, about the importance of partnerships among entities that will show.
And I just wanted, this is, for those of you who are able to join us for the first 2 days, October 4th and 5th, we had the Pritzker Prize winning architects, and we had videos from them. And so this is kind of to come full circle, and this is another video from the architects about their partnerships. And so it's kind of to wrap up our theme throughout this month of Urban October.
Okay.
I think the success of the partnership is all these years we have worked all together.
We started our study in 72, 73, which was very, very special time in France. And it's clear that it was an amazing time of optimism. We studied together in Bordeaux, in the School of Architecture. Very, very fast, we were in a situation to discuss together and to work together.
We have discovered this discipline of architecture, and it was great.
drawing, sculpture, history of art, history of architecture, science, mathematics, all together, social questions. We were working by little groups, and immediately we feel quite fine to work together. Good complementary.
And I was surprised that he was always proposing something original. So I must say that I was intrigued and a bit impressed. The talent of Jean-Philippe is always to think further. He's really free-minded. Sometimes I think that I anticipate what he will say. But finally, he says something totally another direction, totally somewhere else, and he likes to explore.
She makes things possible. That's really important because she has energy, constancy, and when we decide to gather something, I have the feeling that with her we will go to the end.
So for me, a good partnership is, I think, first is to be happy to work together. I think also that it's important to have the feeling of being ourselves, but also being equal. We feel free to discuss and to propose ideas. In a way, we are quite never at the same opinion, but at the end, we agree on everything. So it's, I think it's something like magical.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I think we have final words. Well, actually, Jack, I think you're up next on talking about helping us sponsor more of these programs into the future.
Yes. Thank you, Jeff. You know, event like this, it takes a lot of planning and time and commitment. And this kind of event just doesn't happen. And to bring out this kind of really event for everybody to be more informative, enjoyable, and something that you can really walk away with a certain knowledge. So we really thank Bill for giving us the guidance all the time. And of course, Tim for giving us the inspiration to always put everything into action. And Jeff with his enormous knowledge of the world, with his old travels and things like that, giving us the history. And of course, Judy with her experience in the past. He's been with this organization for 1,000 years, I think. So she has a lot of knowledge. And of course, Jenny, she has the organizing mind and she puts all these things together. It's an awesome lady. Thank you, Jenny. And you think that this is beautiful or really a nice event, wait until next year, okay? Because that's going to be a really, really fantastic event. The World Habitat Day and the UN, United Nations, is coming to Hawaii, coming to Honolulu to be with us. And that's going to be a tremendous, tremendous event. But so far, these are the events that we had for 2021 and 2022. April 6, 2021, we had a virtual annual installation and general membership event, the City Resilience, the Way Forward. It was a joint event with Chicago and Seattle. That was also a very informative event. May 18, 2021, the Urban Thinking Talk for Affordable and Sustainable Cities Tomorrow. City we need is affordable. And July 20, 2021, we had the annual symposium on sustainability and resiliency. Again, October 4 and 5, just about 2 weeks ago, we have the annual UN Habitat Day event. And today, October 25, 2021, we have the annual UN World Cities Day event. And then we have the FIAPSI US Grand Prix program and the FIAPSI Prix, the Excellence program. But let me focus on the next year's event, the annual the annual Habitat Day event, because there is an opportunity for all of us to be a sponsor for this event. And we're really looking for like corporate sponsor, because we're offering some kind of incentive that you become like a member if you sponsor like 5,000, 3,000 or something like that. And it's gonna be really an opportunity for us to, as the song from China said, singing with one symphony. It's a beautiful song, singing with one symphony. To know that the United Nations is coming to Honolulu for the first time, I think is going to be a tremendous event for all of us. So please think about being a sponsor, and talk to your company, talk to your CEO, talk to your corporation to become a sponsor for this really, really awesome event next year. And if you do, please, you can contact me, Jack Legal, and you have my email address in there and also my phone number. And thank you so much again for everything. Thank you, Jeff.
All right. Thank you, Jack, for your kind comments. Last but not least, a few kind words from our chief, Timothy.
Wow, amazing. Another amazing event. Thank you so much. I sincerely appreciate everyone who has participated. And October has been a great month for all of us. Because after all, listening to a great presentation from Nicholas today, Bill, and of course our Jeff, not only moderating, but they speak on a lot of issues and what we can do together in China and Europe, all over the world. And coming from all of you, I think the keyword here is again partnership, and another keyword is actions. So what can we do? What is our takeaway? We have to do something about it. We don't stop here, please, people. And I've been so fortunate to be able to gain all this information from all those great events that Jack just mentioned. And I was able to take that into my development planning. And everybody's thrilled to find out what we can do together to save our Earth. As I stated in the chat room, it's not only for our generation. We need to preserve. We need to, what's left of Earth. Last October, we had a great picture from an 80-year-old that we have ruined this Earth. We're ruining this Earth with carbon emission and all this. People are a lot of people don't know about how to save. What is the consequences of climate changes? I myself is being educated, tremendously from all these events. So I want you to take away what you have learned today, put it in your action, because it starts from you, it starts from us. So somebody has to do something about it, not only for our generation, but think about our kids' generation, next generation to come, because it's already getting too late. And this is really important topic, climate changes. So let's do what we can to resolve these issues and be able to work together as a partner. Again, people are at the center, as we always say, Bill, and 4Ps, private-public partnership for the people. Let's not leave out the people. And in the people, we have our next generation, our kids, their generation, and their kids' generation. So we owe to them to do this together. So again, great event today. Thank you so much for everybody, and mahalo and aloha.
Right. Thank you very much. I would be remiss if I didn't mention two little things. The people in Chengdu really wanted to be here. They intend to be here the next time to give more information about their wonderful city. And the other thing I would like to mention is Yves Wantens, who works with Nicholas, was just here in Hawaii. And for the rest of you that might not know, he was here to look at the Flanders involvement with our World War I memorial, where we had 20,000 Hawaiians participating in World War I in Europe. And so they just laid a wreath here at the natatorium and are looking, and when you talk about water and Amsterdam and Rotterdam, the general representative was here looking at the natatorium and seeing what we can do in the future to continue that memorial as a working memorial, a real swimming place, a real asset to the city and county of Honolulu. And we do want to thank Nicholas and Yves for coming out here and participating with us, and hopefully more so in the future. So again, once again, everyone, thank you very much for participating today. It was a pleasure and an honor to be involved with this program. Aloha and goodbye. Ahui.
Aloha.
Bye-bye.